Tessa from Mama's Geeky here. Thank you so much for stopping by my YouTube channel.
What spoke to me so much of season one was, God, it's such true to life stories, because when you're going through some of the roughest times, like finding comedy or those moments to laugh is so helpful. And I think that was what made the comedy so good, was that these characters going through some real life, divorce, breakups, discover. It's like, even down to Keely, she's kind of trying to figure out who she is. And, Rebecca's going through her journey, but then you find those moments to laugh, and it's all coming from the characters. And that's what was so rewarding about working on season one, was just going on these journeys and kind of discovering. I mean, I think we kind of went in and we didn't really know. We really didn't know. We just were getting the scripts kind of as they were shooting them. And we were just discovering with everybody else. And I would watch the dailies and I'd be like, wow, I think from the way Keely and Rebecca are playing this scene, there's going to be more to their relationship later on. I remember when I was cutting in episode 3, when Keely comes to Rebecca's office and she's like, I'm not scared of you anymore. And they have this wonderful conversation together. And I remember watching the dailies, and there's these great Rebecca reactions of just kind of being tickled by this other woman. And a lot of shows, I think, would maybe pit them against one another. And I just remember picking all those takes of like her just being like, there's something to this girl, and I like her. And then flash forward to when I got the script for 7, and you meet Rebecca's friend Sassy, and you kind of see the, relationship that she had with that friend. And anyways, the female friendships and just all those different character relationships were just really fun. And that's kind of what brought the comedy and the drama together, I think.
My question is for Tony. I was interested in finding out if there were any instances on this show where the first song you wanted for a moment fell through, or you couldn't get the clearance for, but your second or even third choice worked out even better than what your original thought was.
Great question. Well, I'll give you an example in 107, the karaoke episode. Mm-hmm. So especially in that episode, like these songs were scripted. They were, the producers, Jason, everybody wanted specific songs for those moments, especially Rebecca. So Let It Go was a song that was initially chosen. And, with it being a Disney catalog song, they honestly did, they're very particular about, using their songs, and especially in other shows that are not Disney. So that was one that was kind of like iffy until we shot it and got to show them. But initially we got in a denial on that song. So we had to shoot that song and an alternate version, because we didn't know if we were going to be able to clear or get an approval on Frozen. But what happened was, like, as much information as we could provide from the script of how the song is not going to be butchered, the song is going to, she's an amazing singer. And there's no there's no negativity around the song. Once we shot it, I was able to send it to them and get that denial reversed. So we ended up using the right song for that spot. And that was kind of the situation where it was like, they pointed to her singing these Frozen songs to her goddaughter earlier in that episode. So it was pivotal to try and keep that and make sure that we, that we got that win. And then we had a backup song that we shot just in case, because we didn't know, like, if that was actually going to get reversed or not. And that song was I Will Survive. So it was equally as good of a song. But for that moment, that was something that Jason really wanted, and we were able to get that done. As far as other denials in the episode, in the season, I can't remember. I think it was just one other, but it was like a visual vocal that was scripted that we ended up not being able to use, just because, the licensors, the rights holders weren't they weren't keen on their song being used in the show. And being a first season show, you often have some difficulty with, clearances. But like this season, it seems like we're, because of how great the show is, the writing, the acting, and how well the music is used, I think we're going to have a lot less difficulty clearing most of these songs as they come in.
Awesome. Thank you.
I know Jason was thrilled that your point that we got the Diamond Dogs in.
Yeah.
Dogs. So remember that, Tony? We weren't sure. Thrilling that you can license Bowie music.
Well, and that, the other story on that, which I'll tell is there was a obviously the song to point to was Diamond Dogs. Like, they formed this team and call themselves the Diamond Dogs, and it was such a good moment in the season, and absolutely have to use the actual song. But there was the case of it being the Beck cover,
right,
initially, and then
because he wanted to try that, but then when we got Bowie, and then we got Bowie, and we're like, there's no, I mean, A, he's British, and B, it's the original and the best, and I'm so glad we got to use that because it just worked so well at the end.
I'm Karen from We Live Entertainment, and I have a question for Tom. Could you talk about the composing music for not just emotional beats from one scene to another, but for specific episodes? Was there anything that you originally really set out to bring out with your music?
Well, I mean, it was interesting enough. This was unlike anything I'd scored before, in that before we even saw any footage, really, I went and spent 10 days at Marcus's studio where he lives in the UK. We were almost at that point, it was more like making a record than doing what I'm used to, writing to picture. And we put down a whole load of ideas and tried to find the sort of tone for the show based off phone calls with Kip and Jason and reading scripts and the odd kind of clip we'd had here and there. And the sort of emotional beat of the kind of piece came relatively quickly, and we were sort of off to the races in it, we thought. But the things that we actually found hard getting the right tone on was the comedy and the sports stuff, actually. And we look back at a lot of sports movies, and it's a very difficult thing to get right, that actually, I think, to do the sport in a way where it's not sort of cheesy is the wrong word, but in a way where it sort of sits in with the rest of it and kind of keeps an edge, but isn't sort of, well, I suppose cheesy is the right word, something that doesn't sound cheesy. And so that was probably the hardest thing to get right. And probably the hardest cue, I think, was the last, in episode 10, the kind of final sporting moment in that, where you think that they're actually, it's very tense. They can kind of, if they're going to pull it off, and then they don't, which I also think is brilliant, because then you're not expecting that. And Jamie obviously then is the one who scores the goal, but Ted doesn't mind, because he sort of would rather Jamie is going on his journey and part of nurturing that. And it's a very sort of, there's a lot of different emotions and actions going on in a kind of 5-minute sort of window there. And I think that was a very challenging thing to get right. But we did have a sort of what we felt was a strong theme to fall back on, but there was quite a lot of back and forth on that. But it was all incredibly enjoyable and just a great thing to work on with great people.
My name is Ben Cleaver. I'm with that #show.com. This question is for Melissa and AJ. Obviously, you're working with really talented actors and really talented comedians. Jason Sudeikis comes from SNL background. How much, I know this is all digital, but how much of the footage that you're editing ends up, quote unquote, on the cutting room floor that you could just build a completely different comedy series out of? And how hard are you laughing while you're editing this?
I laugh pretty hard, actually. There's so many gems that come out from watching the dailies and you can really see them working through the different comedy beats. And, you know, we've started season 2 and they've just even elevated it. I think they felt even more confident, and we've just found, you know, you can see they found their stride. But yeah, our first season was a lot of exploration. I think nobody knew really what the show was quite yet. And so our first cuts were always like 40 minutes. And then we were talking about, you know, do we get it down to a traditional comedy time of like 28 minutes? And we never could get there because it just didn't feel right to cut so much of the show. But yeah, we did. A lot of times I would be, you know, RIP to my favorite jokes, but like to Jason's, you know, vision for the show. He has such a vision for the show. And sometimes we would cut really funny things, but he would be like, this isn't serving the story or the character, or I don't think this would be in Ted's, you know, character to do something like this. And, you know, it would be something we'd all get a laugh out of, but I don't think it would have been true to the story or the show or the character. And he would ruthless, doesn't have to be there. And he a lot of times would say, okay, we'll remember this for season 2. We'll find a way to get this joke in. And then sometimes we'd really, really want to, you know, hold on to some of the sillier stuff. And but yeah, it's a fair amount of improv that they do. They'll run alt jokes, and sometimes they'll do something just on one take and you won't have like the reverse reaction. So you're really trying like, oh God, this is so funny, this thing that Roy's doing. What can I steal to like make the joke work? Or they've been trying to get there and there's not really like a good button to go out on. So you're constantly trying to like, okay, how do we get this joke in and tell it in a way that's concise and funny and pointed, and like maybe it's something that like ends the scene and we can just like button out. So there's a lot of like workshopping and like massaging that we do with that kind of stuff, where they've, you know, almost got it from the different takes and you're like, okay, I think I can make this funny. I'm thinking of in 5, they do this run at the end about how in the UK their 911 is 999, I think. And then yeah, and so it was that was a lot of like, if you notice in the cut, I'm like bouncing around to try to make the joke land. And so, you know, there's always a way. We always find a way, I think. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a joy when you're working with a great improv actor like Jason. I mean, they have great writers and they'll write a great script, but they'll always have an option for 1 or 2 alts. And instinctively, I think we want to try the script first because that's what they've spent time writing. So we put that joke in, but Jason's always, you know, asking what other alts do we have here? And I will show him things. And it's fun to go through different choices. Like, you know, Higgins had so many different names for his cat that we could have gone with. I think we settled with Cindy Crawford. Again, none of this stuff was in the script. So they come up with it in the moment. But, you know, to Mel's point, Jason, you know, is going more for the arcs of the characters. So sometimes we cut a joke because it doesn't serve the story, but also we will add a joke that might be funny that could have been cut, but we add it because it gets us to a reaction. In 106, when the team is having the meeting and that camera is spinning around the garbage can that they're all sacrificing things. There was you know, we had a bunch of choices in there, but one of the team players, you know, sacrificed some sand from a beach. And he was like, I was on the beach with a supermodel, and he was all missing it. And then we only included that joke just to get to the look of Rebecca kind of rolling her eyes at this kind of, you know, she's laughing at misogyny at that point, is the way she's being treated in the press. So that was an example of adding a joke to get to a reaction. But yeah, things are, you know, on the cutting room floor, and then the gems are discovered, and it's fun going through the dailies, and we're not expecting a joke. And then there are great moments like Jason running out of Rebecca's office in episode 10, and he mistimes the leap and hits his head on the door. That was obviously one take and the last take for that day, because he could have hurt himself, but it was a brilliant piece of improv. And I remember the director emailing me and like, you have to include this. So that's always the gems that you find working with a great comedic actor, and it makes it fun as an editor, because then we're off script, and then the script then is written in the cutting room and in the edit, and that's thrilling. Yeah.
Thank you.
AJ? AJ, go ahead.
Oh, by the way, I love your mustache. I don't know if that's like a Ted Lasso mustache, but it's awesome.
No, it's in Jason's honor. I'm
Yeah.
also wearing my Wichita State.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, the governor
Nice.
of Kansas, the governor of Kansas the other day, I saw a news story, just made a proclamation that Ted Lasso is the Kansas Coach of the Year.
There you go.
I love when the real character mixes with reality. It is great.
Love it.
Yes, hi, my name is AJ and I'm with What to Discuss Now podcast. This question is for the sound team. How was it like working with Dolby Atmos with Apple TV and just hearing everything and just working with the Dolby Atmos production on this? Just how did that all come together?
This is Brent. I'm going to, Sean and Ryan, not to put you guys on the spot, I'm going to defer to them because I'll bring the dialogue and the crowds. And Lawson, I love your demo on your effects page about how you have different crowds for different reactions ready to go for winning, losing, home and away teams. We had to do the same thing with the sound of the crowds, but it's Sean and Ryan that get to just lean into those Atmos height speakers and the width and fill the stadium. So I can bring them the material and those guys just take it by the horns and dial it in the room. So Ryan, Sean.
Yeah, so I guess my first approach to dealing with Atmos is that I kind of look at where we are visually and see, where should this sound exist? Like how high up is it? Like as far as like when we're down on the field of the stadium. When I was dealing with group, I would try to position things in a realistic way as far as like, with the depth of where we were. And then we had the shots that we were in the stands and how it filled out around us. Sean dealt with a lot of backgrounds as well as far as how he built the height and everything. And I'll let him speak for what he did. But yeah, it's really fun. It's a great thing. I really hope that it works out to where a lot of people adapt Atmos in their homes, because what we hear on the stage in the studio, it's really special in the way that it really fills out the sound and wraps around you. But I'll turn over some more here to Sean.
Yeah, as far as the crowds go, in the stadium is where I really got to play the height on a lot of the crowds. And where that's really helpful is you get to separate it from the music, you get to separate it from the center speaker, from the dialogue. So the dialogue is still singing in your face, but you get this atmosphere around you. It's very immersive. I also get to play with the sound design. Brent will give me some sound effects, or the editors, AJ and Melissa, will give me sound effects like for the panic attack. And to get those to swim around the room, it creates a whole new soundscape. It's dizzying. It really helps support the story. But at the same time, there's places to not play it. If we're interior, there's no Atmos going on because it's just too distracting and too gimmicky. So if it supports the story, I'm all for it.
Sorry, I just have to jump in on these guys because they're not even giving you a fraction of the challenges they faced in doing this. But the watching them work is really cool because they took a half-hour comedy, which as far as putting shows in Dolby Atmos these days is not really intuitive in most senses, and a lot of times doesn't really support the story, exactly like Sean's saying. And these guys found very unique ways to embrace it, to lean into it for the big scenes, but they also made it so you could listen to it at home on where you may not have the Atmos to really enjoy the scope of what they built, and it still translates. And finding a way to walk that line, I still kind of am in awe of what they pulled off there.
Thank you.
I'm in awe too. You guys do amazing work. Brent and Ryan just really bring the picture to life. And it's such a joy to, because we cut with temp sound and then to see how they fill the stadiums out. And Jason is so specific. He's giving us notes to like share with them about, because yeah, he does love to tell story with all the tools, including sound. So thank you guys.
Yeah, I was going to say one of the things I'm missing is we're able to go to the mixes a lot of the times, but now in the age of COVID, not so much, but to go in there and just hear the magic on those big speakers and to see them do all those like crazy thing. I remember seeing them do some soccer stuff and doing the Atmos and just feeling that in the room. And it was really, really cool and really special. And one of the perks of the job that I love is like getting out of the cutting room and seeing how the cuts live in the beautiful world out of our Avids at full, resolution and sound and music and VFX. Like that's like one of the most special things. When Tom was talking about the football music, I remember in 5, it's like the first big football episode we had, and we come out of the locker room and Roy makes the pass to Obasanya and he makes the goal. And my assistant and I, when that music came in and we put it under the scene, it was just goosebumps. And we just were like, oh man. And then when we saw the VFX coming in of the stadium, it was just like, wow, I didn't know I was working on this show almost, working with just the players in front of a green screen and is, you're trying to imagine it, how grand it could be. And then to see it is just, oh.
Yeah, it was so great to work on. It was very awesome. Yeah, we loved every minute of all that.
Like working with Marcus Mumford, and overall, or would you say you're proud of the soundtrack that you created?
It was great. I mean, he's a phenomenal talent. I've worked with a lot of different people, and the first time I met him was actually out in LA, and then I flew over to his place in England, as I said earlier, and we had about 10 days where we were just sort of messing around, almost like we were making a record. And one of the first things that we did was the theme song. And I've worked with a lot of singers, but this was first thing in the morning. He'd had about 3 cups of coffee and he said, I'll just put down a vocal. And I thought it's going to be a guide vocal. We'll fix it later, when we're, and he just sort of stood up, no kind of warming up or anything. And he just launched into it and it was faultless, and then he said, I'll double track that. And he double tracked it. It was full. And then he said, okay, go to the chorus. I'm going to add the harmonies. And it was pretty much 10 minutes done. And that was it. I never had to redo it again. And yeah, he just very phenomenal musician, can play drums, guitars, all sorts, and obviously just a really incredible voice. I mean, you'll never walk alone at the end there. I mean, that's really all about his vocal delivery. That's what's, the backing is very minimal, but it's just, he's got a real kind of emotion and sort of resonance in his voice. And so it was a great experience. I mean, you don't often get, and also we then did go on to be locked down and all sort of on our own, but I don't usually get to hang out with anybody. I mean, I sometimes get to go to the mix or we do spotting, for a kind of couple of hours, but I mean, to spend 10 days with somebody, smashing through ideas, it was a real luxury and a lot of fun.
Thank you so much to all of my monetary supporters, my members here on YouTube, as well as my patrons. If you haven't joined yet, please consider doing so. We have some really awesome perks, including a monthly Zoom meeting where we get to talk face to face. Thank you again to everyone who supports me.